The Young and the Restless Spoilers. Nick had barely slept since the day the DNA results came back. The revelation that Noah was Adam's son had detonated like a bomb inside his soul, but the chaos didn't stop there. Something about Noah's accident had never made sense to him. The timing, the location, the silence from the surveillance cameras, all too convenient. The police report called it a collision caused by fatigue, but Nick knew his son too well. Noah wasn't reckless. He hadn't been speeding, hadn't been drinking. The car had been tampered with. Someone wanted him dead. Nick couldn't let it go, not after everything else that had been ripped away from him. Losing Noah to Adam by blood was one thing, losing him to death by someone's hand was another. And deep inside, Nick felt that this wasn't random fate. It was personal. He began retracing every detail of the crash, from the mechanical failure to the phone records in the days leading up to it. Sharon thought he was being paranoid, still reeling from emotional trauma, but Nick's instincts as a father, and as a Newman, told him there was more to the story. Then came the anonymous message, a digital whisper that changed everything. It was a voice, distorted but unmistakably familiar. If you want answers, stop looking in the wrong places. Meet me. Alone. The coordinates attached pointed to an abandoned motel on the outskirts of Genoa City, a place long forgotten, a place tied to ghosts. Nick hesitated, but his need for truth outweighed caution. When he arrived, the air was thick with mildew and memory. The door creaked open, and there he was, a man Nick thought the earth had already reclaimed. Ray Rosales. The shock hit him like a punch to the chest. He looked older, worn, his eyes darkened with bitterness and exhaustion, but unmistakably alive. "You're supposed to be dead," Nick breathed, the words almost choking him. Ray gave a hollow laugh. "That's what everyone thinks." It was impossible to process. Ray, the once principled detective who had protected Sharon, who had stood for justice and loyalty, now stood before him like a shadow resurrected. Nick's first instinct was disbelief, followed by anger. "You faked your death? Why? And what the hell does Noah's accident have to do with you?" But Ray didn't answer immediately. He just stared, a ghost of the man he once was. The silence between them carried years of resentment, of betrayal, of something darker brewing beneath. When Ray finally spoke, his words were cold enough to freeze blood. "I didn't die. I disappeared. Because sometimes, it's easier to let people mourn you than to face what they did to you." Nick's confusion turned to dread as he began to piece it together. This wasn't about him. It was about Sharon. Always Sharon. "You think she hurt you," Nick said slowly, realizing the depth of the madness before him. "You think destroying her family will fix what she did." Ray's eyes flickered with something sharp and feral. "She didn't just hurt me, Nick. She broke me. I gave her everything, my loyalty, my life, my heart. And she threw it away for Adam, again and again. She couldn't even mourn me without thinking of him. Do you know what that does to a man? To watch from the shadows while the woman you died for moves on to the same man who ruined you?" Nick clenched his fists, his pulse pounding in disbelief. "So you tried to kill Noah? He's innocent." Ray's lips twisted into a smirk that carried no humor. "Innocent? No. He's her son, their son. A living reminder of everything she took from me. Sharon loved him because he was part of her and Adam. And she loved you because you were safe. But me? I was never more than a temporary shelter. I realized that the only way to make her feel what I felt was to take away the one thing that could shatter her, her child." The words were venom, and Nick's stomach turned at the sheer cruelty of it. "You were a cop," he said, his voice trembling between rage and sorrow. "You upheld the law, you saved lives, you were supposed to be better than this." Ray's expression hardened. "The law doesn't heal betrayal, Nick. Justice doesn't mend a broken heart. I spent years living by rules that didn't protect me when it mattered most. Sharon killed the man I used to be long before I vanished. All I did was return the favor. Nick took a step closer, fury rising in him like wildfire. You're insane. Ray tilted his head. Maybe. But insanity's the only thing that feels honest in this town. He reached into his coat and tossed a small flash drive onto the table between them. Everything you need to know about the car, the setup, the timing, it's all there. Consider it a confession or a challenge. Depends on what kind of man you are now. Nick stared at it, torn between the urge to grab him by the throat and the need to understand. Ray's voice softened, almost mournful. You should be thanking me. Noah lived. Fate's not done with you yet. The words dripped with an eerie certainty, as if Ray believed destiny itself was part of his revenge. But tell Sharon, he added coldly, that I'm not finished. She can't bury me twice. Nick left the motel trembling, the flash drive burning in his pocket like a loaded weapon. That night, as he watched over Noah's hospital bed, he couldn't shake Ray's words. The thought that a man Sharon once loved, a man who once swore to protect their family, had tried to destroy it was almost too much to bear. He couldn't tell Sharon, not yet. Not while she was already drowning in guilt. But the truth wouldn't stay hidden for long. In Genoa City, secrets were like smoke, you could try to contain them, but they always found a way to escape. When Nick finally plugged in the flash drive, his heart sank. It contained blueprints of the Newman security system, intercepted emails, surveillance footage. Evidence that Ray had been watching them for months. There were voice logs too, recordings of Sharon talking to herself in her kitchen, late at night, unaware she was being monitored. Ray had been there, listening, waiting, feeding his hatred with every word she spoke. He had orchestrated Noah's accident meticulously, ensuring it would look like a mechanical failure while keeping himself invisible. Nick slammed his fist against the desk, the reality almost too grotesque to comprehend. Days passed before he confronted Sharon. She was already unraveling. The guilt over Noah's paternity had crushed her spirit. When Nick finally told her the truth, her face drained of color. She sank to the floor, whispering Ray's name like it was a ghost returned to haunt her. It can't be, she said, shaking her head violently. He's dead. I saw his body. But Nick's eyes told her everything. Ray wasn't dead. He had been watching. He had been waiting. And now, he wanted vengeance. Sharon's tears came fast, her voice breaking. He loved me once. I never meant to hurt him. Nick's tone was sharp, unforgiving. You hurt everyone, Sharon. You loved us all just enough to ruin us. The cruelty in his voice made her flinch, but he didn't take it back. Not this time. Meanwhile, Ray moved like a phantom through Genoa City. He stayed hidden, always one step ahead, feeding the chaos he had unleashed. For him, this wasn't about death anymore, it was about making Sharon watch her life collapse piece by piece. He wanted her to see the consequences of every lie, every betrayal, every choice that had cost others their peace. In his twisted logic, he wasn't just avenging himself, he was avenging every man who had ever loved her and lost himself in the process. As word began to spread that Ray might still be alive, the Newman family grew restless. Victor demanded answers, ordering private investigators to hunt him down. Adam was skeptical, part of him even admired the audacity of it. But Nick was consumed by rage. This time, he wouldn't let the past destroy another life. He tracked Ray's movements, following every clue, every shadow, until he found him again, not in a motel, but in a cemetery, standing before his own grave. The irony was unbearable. Ray didn't flinch as Nick approached. You shouldn't have come, he said. You don't understand what's at stake. Nick's voice was shaking. No, Ray. I understand perfectly. You're not punishing Sharon, you're punishing yourself. But Ray only smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. Before Nick could speak again, Ray pulled something from his pocket, a photograph of Sharon, younger, happier, holding Noah as a baby. You can't erase what's been done, he whispered. She already did that for me. And then, just as suddenly as he had returned, Ray vanished into the night, leaving Nick standing in front of an empty grave, the echo of his footsteps swallowed by the wind. When Nick returned home, the flash drive still in his pocket, he knew this wasn't over. Ray was alive, broken, and obsessed, and Sharon was his unfinished business. Noah had survived, but the scars would remain. The Newman family, already fractured by betrayal and bloodlines, now faced an even darker enemy, one born not of greed or rivalry, but of love twisted into vengeance. And in the quiet of that long night, as Nick looked out over Genoa City, he realized something chilling. Sometimes, the deadliest enemies aren't strangers. They're the ones who once swore to love you forever. Would you like me to continue the next chapter, where Ray begins targeting Sharon directly, perhaps by manipulating Faith or setting up Adam to take the blame, leading to a dangerous climax between Nick and Ray in the woods outside Genoa City? That continuation could heighten the suspense and close the revenge arc dramatically. Ray did not become monstrous overnight. What the town remembers as the brave cop who loved Sharon was only a half of the man. The rest was a slow unraveling stitched together from betrayal, humiliation, and the simmering conviction that life had cheated him in the cruelest way. After he vanished, staged death, quiet disappearance, he didn't simply hide, he festered. Being presumed dead gave him a freedom he used like a scalpel. From exile he watched Sharon move on, watched the Newman machine reclaim its rhythm, watched Nick stand proud and whole while the memory of what they had was burned as ash. The wound that ate him was not just that Sharon left him, it was the way she returned to a life of privilege and safety while his loyalty, his love, had been discarded like a used bandage. Every Newman anniversary, every family milestone, every news headline that omitted him stitched more salt into the same wound. Hatred, in Ray's case, was not a flash, it was methodical cultivation. He rehearsed humiliation until it became identity. He told himself that destroying what Sharon loved would balance the ledger of his pain. He rationalized cruelty as justice. If he could make Sharon watch what it felt like to have everything taken, then the world would finally reflect his suffering back at him. That is why he faked death, why he studied their lives like a detective turned predator, and why the accident was designed to terrify as much as to wound. Killing Noah would have been the ultimate message: you will lose what defines you. That trajectory, love, betrayal, obsession, violence, is ugly but believable, and it gives Ray tragic, dangerous depth. He is not a cartoon villain but a broken man weaponized by his own grief. When Nick hears Ray admit everything, threats against Noah, vows to make Sharon suffer, even cold, precise predictions that Sharon will die by his hand, his first instinct is to go to law enforcement, and that's exactly what he does. But the world is practical and cynical. A man reported dead years ago coming back as an avenger reads like madness, like a manipulation. The local police, and a public that loves tidy narratives, will be slow to accept the impossible. At first they will treat Nick's report as a domestic drama, a husband traumatized by revelations, high emotion, confused identity. That disbelief is dramatic fuel. It forces Nick to prove Ray's existence and gives Ray time to escalate, which is exactly the emotional ticking clock you want on screen. How Nick forces belief is the story's small, meticulous courtroom of proof. He brings the flash drive with Ray's confessions, surveillance clips, intercepted emails, the motel meeting timestamp, phone metadata showing Ray's presence in areas he should not be in. Those digital artifacts are the critical bridge from fantasy to case. If Ray is clever, he'll have kept his tracks thin, but not invisible. Obsession leaves crumbs. The flash drive Ray tossed at the motel is both a taunt and an insurance policy. Ray wants to be acknowledged for the pain he inflicted. That same evidence, once turned over to either Genoa City PD or a federal task force interested in a presumed dead man resurfacing, forces a preliminary investigation. They will send officers, but credibility will hinge on two things: corroboration, camera footage, physical evidence where the car was tampered, and a live sighting or reliable trace, bank transaction, authenticated voicemail, DNA from cigarette butt, footprints. Nick's desperation will push him to do things the police won't: hire private investigators, call in Victor's leverage to add pressure, or temporarily post family security around Noah and Sharon. Victor will not like being told to wait. He will mobilize private muscle and old contacts, and that escalation will infuriate Ray because the Newman response proves Ray's premise. The family will rally like an army to protect itself. That rally becomes his theater. So yes, at first the authorities balk. They're used to one-dimensional threats, not a ghost who staged his death. But once Nick hands over Ray's evidence and the investigators corroborate even a sliver, the security breach around Noah's car, the unusual service work on the brake lines, a surveillance camera that Ray took pains to avoid but couldn't entirely blind, suddenly the story tilts. Ray is no longer paranoid folklore, he's a person of interest. The police issue an alert. Detectives reopen the file on Ray's disappearance and begin to reconstruct his movements. This is where the public drama bursts, tabloids circle, the Newman name becomes fuel for 24-hour speculation, and Sharon is forced out of the soft privacy she's been hiding in. The police arrival, their procedural steps, the subpoenas, the forensic technicians dusting for prints, all of that can be staged in a tense montage that shows momentum. But even with momentum, Ray's knowledge of police procedure makes him slippery. He anticipates evidence collection and covers his tracks. That gives the show a second, longer chase, the cat and mouse of a man desperate enough to be dangerous, versus a family with resources desperate enough to stop him. Narratively, the most satisfying arc is not immediate capture. Nick's report should be the start of a spiraling sequence. Ray escalates, threatening voicemail left on Sharon's phone, a package with baby clothes drenched in perfume, an unmarked photo of Noah sleeping. The police increase patrols but remain one step behind. Victor uses influence to squeeze leads, and Adam, who has already been dragged into this disaster by paternity and guilt, becomes dangerously implicated in Ray's mind as another reason to hurt Sharon. Ray's threats against Sharon might be staged to make Adam look protective, or Ray might attempt to manipulate evidence so one of the Newmans is suspected of orchestrating the drama. That's classic soap misdirection, and it's deliciously cruel. Ray is both avenger and puppeteer. Practical protective measures that make sense on screen and increase tension are clear. Nick files an emergency restraining order, even if it's only symbolic at first. The family hires close protection for Sharon and Noah. They move Noah under guarded care during vulnerable medical moments, and they install sudden, visible security upgrades that Ray interprets as proof his actions matter. To force Ray out of hiding, Nick or Victor should leak controlled information as bait, a staged hospital transfer, a fake family outing, or a public appointment Sharon must attend under heavy guard. Ray, whose motive is to make Sharon feel exposed and helpless, will respond. The collision of Ray's need to be seen with the Newman family's need to protect creates a brilliant showdown scene, perhaps in a wintered park, a church at night, or the Newman ranch's back acres, where Ray confronts Sharon and Nick with raw hatred. The police close in from a perimeter that Ray had not anticipated, and the emotional truths bleed out in public. Finally, for maximum dramatic richness, don't end Ray's arc in a single episode. Let him oscillate between captured and spectral. Maybe he is caught, but his capture reveals deeper wounds that complicate viewers' feelings, a breakdown in court, a confession that reveals painful truths about Sharon and the Newman family. Or maybe he is shot at the dramatic climax and presumed dead again, leaving the door open for future torment. Either ending is valid. What matters is the fallout. Sharon must publicly own her mistakes, Nick must face what fatherhood means beyond blood, and Adam must reconcile a new role with the moral cost of his history. Victor will demand retribution. The town will choose sides. Noah, when old enough, will have to grapple with identity in a family that defines itself by scandal. If you want immediate scene beats to stage this next episode, 1. Nick hands Ray's evidence to Genoa City PD. They scoff until the forensic team finds tampering in Noah's car. 2. Police issue an APB. Ray leaves a threatening voicemail for Sharon. 3. Victor hires private security. Nick installs protection at the hospital. 4. Ray attempts to confront Sharon in a public place. Adam intercepts and nearly fights him. police arrive and Ray is taken, but his ugly monologue is broadcast, seeding more scandal. 5. At the hearing, Ray lashes out, revealing details of the affair that force Sharon into a public confession. Her credibility collapses, Victor's fury peaks, and the Newman family fractures into factions. 6. Cliffhanger, Ray escapes custody in the final moments, or he dies ambiguously, leaving the family's worst fears unresolved. This keeps the plot believable. Police skepticism turns to action because of evidence, psychologically grounded. Ray's motive is credible trauma weaponized into revenge, and dramatically satisfying. The Newman family is shredded by scandal in the public eye. If you want, I can now write the full episode script for the meeting where Nick turns over Ray's flash drive and the PD reacts, including Ray's voicemail, the forensic reveal, and the first confrontation that ends in Ray's temporary capture. Which scene would you like me to write in full next? The police handoff, Ray's public confrontation, or the courtroom hearing where Ray testifies?